I wanted to, I mean, when I thought of my grandparents, what I was after was not the historical facts about them. I realized after doing some research, it wasn't the record of the lives they had lived, it was what their lives felt like to live. So the whole project was always to understand them as living, present people, and to, you know, I'm trying in some way to reanimate them in the space of a fiction. And to do that, the present tense felt like what was appropriate. But a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole project was a surprise in some way. I wrote the project sort of to. I based it as much as I could off of the facts of these people's lives. The metaphor I've been using is it's sort of like when you visit one of the well-touristed sites of ancient history, like Pompeii or Mount Masada, and you see, you know, the original, or Babylon is a much more egregious example of this. You see the original ruins, you know, you see the fragments of columns and things, and then they've constructed a city, or they've reconstructed it on top of it, and you can see exactly where the lines are. So I began with the details, and I tried to build these lives on top of it. Out of necessity, a lot of it came out of my imagination. And my imagination surprised me. I mean, I do feel in the end, the project was a kind of success. I mean, I feel like they are more coherent and definite people to me, although ultimately the people that they're fictional characters and also a product of my own imagination. They did many things that surprised me, and I think I usually try to impose a lot of structure upon what I'm writing, and in this book I felt like I freely had to just let go of that and let the voices carry me where they would. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at a certain point, I did just call. I mean, it is a novel, and in the end, it's a novel, and I allowed myself the freedoms of fiction. And then I would say at the beginning, I was going to try to write as nonfiction. That project wasn't working because that wasn't delivering the news that I wanted. I mean, it wasn't giving me, you know, like actually recreating these people for me. So then I wrote it as fiction, but then I kind of started to feel that the entire story was not just the story of their lives, but about the idea of their lives and about the way that their legacy has been passed toward me and been reimagined. And I feel like, in the end, I have faith that anyone who comes from a family will, even if the structure of the book is a little bit unfamiliar to some people, it will, I mean, as literature, the structure of it as the way that we think of our family will be deeply familiar to anyone. It was a little bit of everything. The research. I have a belief, and maybe I'm going to run out of material at some point soon. But I kind of think that I should never research a book deliberately. Like it should be something I've been researching because it comes out of a deep personal urgency that's always been with me. So I'd always just been fascinated by these people. I'd always looked at their pictures very closely, read their letters very closely. When the moment came that I knew I was writing about them, I interviewed every person that was still surviving who had known them. Part of that was part of the project of the book, but then in some ways it was just a personal project to try to get to know these people better and to not lose that information. I mean, because so much had already been lost. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question. I learned my tolerance for solitude and caffeine. I think it's probably the biggest revelation. You know, I think when I was beginning my first novel, and even in some ways beginning this novel, I strongly believed in the idea of catharsis through writing, that if we wrote the things that haunted us the most and put them down on paper, who was it, Henry Miller, that said the best way to get over a woman is to turn her into literature, that was something that you could do with your own personal pain, your private past. I think I realized it's not necessarily true. And in some ways, actually, when you focus upon your trouble, it expands in your mind. It was a very difficult winter when I was really intensely writing this book. So one of the things I learned as a writer is that when you take on a project, it's not just, you know, it's not just your work. I mean, it's not just something that you're going to do for a few hours a day. It's going to take over your mind, and to write it genuinely, you have to really inhabit that space. So I think one of the things I learned is that want to write more optimistically. I mean, I think I need to get out of the mental hospital and mental disease for a while. I don't know. Although it's funny, in my first reaction, right after I finished the book, I didn't realize that. And the thing that I started to write immediately after writing this was a man. It's like the first book dealt with Alzheimer's, not really in the mental hospital. This was largely in a mental hospital. And then I had begun a novel about a man in a coma. So it was going to be... So I decided, no, now I'm going to write something where they can jog. Full use of their limbs. I don't know exactly. I mean, in a way, what I hope is that it's a great reading experience, and that that's a compelling and emotional story. I don't necessarily seek to edify or to, like, deliver any epiphany or moral. I mean, it's a very personal project. The books that I love, most of the books I love the most are deeply personal projects, and that is what compels me through the pages the most. So my hope is that a reader, when they approach this book, would feel my urgency, and in some ways it could become their own and propel them through the pages. And that's really the extent of it. It's just a good read.